Can you hear me good?
Yeah, hey, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good, yeah, I'm good. I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Excellent.
So your name is it
Uh,
Chandler or Chandler? What's
Chandler.
Chandler? Chandler. Okay, radio. First time we've debated. I've watched a few of your debates. I watched the one you did the other night with Julian, which I most enjoyed.
Yeah, we actually debated in the November tournament.
Okay, we did, didn't we? What was it
The
about?
U.S. nuking Japan, I think it was.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Which I obviously won that debate. Obviously, yeah. Because I mean, obviously. I know probably people voted against me, but I still won. Anyway, Israel has keep up with. Israel has no right to claim Jerusalem as its capital city, and the USA is wrong to recognize it. So I put the word Jerusalem in quotes because to me it's more about, it's not about West Jerusalem. It wouldn't worry me to see West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, as long as it's part of a final settlement. However, the idea that they are sort of claiming Jerusalem as an undivided city before any peace agreement, is the nub of the matter to me. That's what I think is very wrong. So that's what I think. I'm hoping that this may be a kind of a continuation of the debate that you had with Julian the other night, to perhaps sort of go over some of the things that you didn't have time to address, and some of the things that I'd like to sort of add my opinion to. So anyway, do you want to contradict me?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so like I said, I'm not an expert on this. I did a lot of the research on the historical aspects just shortly before my debate with Julian. So to start, the main premise of the other debate I did with Julian was whether or not Trump made the proper move by enforcing the bill to move the embassy to Jerusalem, which I still believe is yes, because he has that obligation to American people. And this topic is much more historical than that, and whether or not the Jewish people the Israel has the right to claim Jerusalem as the capital city. And so I want just to ask a question to start: why you think that the Palestinians have a greater claim on the city of Jerusalem than the Israeli people?
Why? Well, because they've lived there for more than 1,000 years. Why? And they were booted out through a process of ethnic cleansing, which started in November 1947 and initially ended sometime during 1949, where they were pushed into the West Bank and Gaza, and then again in 1967. Now, after World War II, I mean, you've heard of the UN. The UN was enshrined following the disaster of World War II and the Holocaust, I think, because the civilized nations of the world said, we don't want to do this again. This can't happen. So the civilized nations of the world got together and they signed this charter, and the main enshrined in that that the acquisition of territory through military conquest is no longer admissible. So you have Palestinian people, or the people that we call Palestinians, the ethnic Arabs that had lived there for well over 1,000 years, were actually ethnically cleansed. They were pushed out. So I cannot see how anybody could say that they don't have the right to their own homeland. Right to your homeland, or do you think somebody can come along and push you out?
I mean, it depends on the situation, right? Everybody has a right to their homeland to some extent, but for this, it comes to the question of who has the deeper historical claims to Jerusalem. So I think just as good an argument could be made that the Jewish people.
No, it doesn't. No, It doesn't, Chandler. I'm sorry. If you're going to start quoting all that biblical shit to me, forget it, because I'm not going to buy that.
Well, I mean, it's a foundation, right, of what people believe. Whether or not it actually happened is rather irrelevant, right? It's what people
No, it
believe.
doesn't. It's not. No, sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's not about what people believe. Not at all. That's nonsense. It's about how the law stands. If we're going to apply biblical history from 2,000 years ago, then what about your history? What about your country's history? Where did your people come?
We came from
your own ancestors. Where did they
German
come from?
and England. My mother is German. My
okay. Well, how long ago was that?
At least over 100 years. And then in the
100 years. Gosh. Oh, what a long time. And who was, weren't other people sitting on the land that you have taken, you and your family have taken, your nation has taken?
Uh-huh.
What if the Native Americans said, "Oh, look, we've got this, where are we? Let's get you a book. We've got this thing, we call it, like you have your Bible, we call it our Bible. This says that we had this land before you." I mean, the thing is, they don't need this Bible because they don't need a ridiculous biblical text to prove that they had that land. It's historically and archaeologically proved. So if you're going to acquire kind of scenario to Israel, then I'm sorry, but you've got to equate it to your own land as well.
But the reason I bring up why people believe what people believe is important is because Julian talked about like the location of the temple and the location of the Wailing Wall and how archaeologists don't believe that's where those locations and those sites actually were. And I say that's irrelevant because if people, and especially an ethnic group like the Jews or the Palestinians or the Israelis, anybody believes a certain site has holy significance, they're going to try to get that site and try to control that site, no matter how much, how accurate that actually is, if that makes sense. That's why I think it's important what people believe, and that's why I tie that point.
Yeah, they're going to try to get those sites. Of course they are, and who can blame them? But I don't buy it that they should have any right any more than, I mean, okay, look at England. Have you heard of a place called Stonehenge in England? You have, okay. It's down in Wiltshire. It's supposed to be one of the oldest historical religious sites on the planet, basically. Well, that's claimed by the Druids. So what do? We say to the Druids, yes, you can have this as your own town. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. There is stop Jewish people visiting a holy site if they wish to, just like any other holy site in the world. But what you're advocating is something completely different. It's this political right of people who, according to some bloody ridiculous friggin' some book, that's supposed to be written by God. I don't know. I don't really care. To me, that's just complete nonsense. It doesn't matter. Nobody racially inherits land. If you're going to go back that far and say, oh, well, the Jews were there, this, that, and the other, bollock. Where my people are from, probably Germany, just like yours were, making, for all I know. I don't know. The Palestinian people, the people that we call the Palestinian people, have lived on that land that was their home under various different regimes, etc., etc. It doesn't matter. It was their home for well over 1,000 years, and no one, especially following the aftermath of World War II, has got any legal right to take that from them.
Okay, so a few points here. Getting to the core of this debate and kind of what we talked about in the comments and with Julian's debate. So to start, I'm not here to say that the Palestinians have been treated fairly or the Palestinians have no right to the claim. So I want to ask you a question. Should we recognize Washington, D.C. as the capital of the United States of America?
Should we recognize it? Well, we do, don't we? So I don't really get your point. We do recognize it. We recognize it now. I think it became the capital. Was it following 1812 war, or was it? Because it was Philadelphia originally, wasn't it?
Yes, but should countries recognize the Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States?
Well, I guess they do recognize it. So yes, we have. Internationally, it's recognized. So I believe in following international law. So therefore, yes.
Okay, so to say that because another group of people or a prior group of people used to inhabit this land and you took it from them, and therefore you should not recognize a capital, which is quite honestly a realization that's basically the capital of Israel, that the United States and then obviously the Israelis identify with, is illogical just because some other group has a claim to the land. We wouldn't say that we shouldn't recognize Washington, D.C.
No,
because
it's
the Native
not.
Americans used to have a right to that
No,
land.
that's absolute nonsense. Washington. Okay, just confirm to me when Washington D.C. was actually, proclaimed as the capital. What year was that?
It was early 1800s. They had the discussion.
Early 1800s.
Let me look.
Didn't the British? Didn't those dastardly British set fire to the White House or something?
Yes, they did burn it down during 1812.
Not me, obviously. Not me, because I'm Irish, so don't blame me. Anyway.
Yeah, they burned it down during 1812. That's been during.
But okay. So that's like 19th century stuff, isn't it? A lot of shit happened in the 19th century. All sorts of things. We had slaves, all manner of things. What's happened since then is that the so-called civilized nations have become more civilized. They have embraced something called international law. Maybe if you went back, if you applied, the situation of America in today's world, okay, you can equate it to something like trying to invent the motor car today. They'd go like, "What? You can't do this. It's far too dangerous." Maybe the whole thing about America, it wouldn't happen either. There'd be huge opposition to it all. There'd be, "Oh, you've turfed out, you've ethnically cleansed the Native Americans," all that sort of thing. We don't live in the 19th century. We live in the, hang on, which century are we? Oh, yes, the 21st century, isn't it? And Israel, the state of Israel, was created in the 20th century, 1948. So, we had been through World War II. We had formed the United Nations, and all of its charter went with it. So I'm sorry, but I do not buy your analogy. It's a complete false equivalence.
Okay. So the reason I brought that up and the reason I think it's important is because whether or not somebody rightfully took a piece of land, whether they did it justly, if they recognize it as the capital, and basically that's the center of their commerce and their business, other countries should recognize that as the capital. And even to say that the Jewish people have no claim or no historic ties to the city of Jerusalem is also not true. Even in the ancient Jewish text, you said not to bring up the Bible or the Torah, but even in the ancient Jewish text, it still mentions the city of Jerusalem.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Chandler. Look, I'm an Anglo-Saxon, okay? I've to the Lower Saxony Valley of East flipping Mannersheim or somewhere, wherever it is. It doesn't matter. People don't inherit land. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just feel I need to sort of close down these arguments. So carry on with the main thrust of what you're saying.
Okay, well, the reason I bring this up is because it's not fair to say that they have no historic ties to a piece of land, right? That's not a sufficient argument, because the Jewish people, as we can both agree, do, correct? We can agree.
I don't care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're talking ancient history. It doesn't matter. Okay.
If it doesn't matter,
as I keep saying, if you're going to go back that far, you have to rearrange the global map in a pretty different way. Okay. The Turks would have to move back to Byzantium. The most of the bridges would have to go back to the Scandinavian lands and Germany, etc. And all you guys in America would all have to come back to Europe. So it's crazy. You can't do that.
But okay, so why did they select the piece of land that they gave Israel after World War II? Why was that specific piece of land selected?
because they were stupid and they were bribed and they were bullied by everybody else. And I don't agree with it at all, quite honestly. If that's another debate. But I think the crux of the matter is this, and this is a point I'd like to get across. Okay, in 1947, the partition plan awarded, rightly or wrongly, let's not judge that, but I'm just saying that it awarded approximately 55% of the land of Palestine for a Jewish state, okay? 55% in favor of the Jewish population, which was unfair because there were actually more Arab Palestinians there. 55%, which didn't include Jerusalem, okay? That was to be an international city. Now, on May the 14th, 1948, the date Israel declared its statehood. Sorry, just to recap slightly, that UN was called UN Resolution 181. Okay, so in the declaration of statehood for Israel, actually used that UN resolution, UN 181, to base their state on. Okay, at the end of 1945. The Zionists had actually claimed around 8% of the land of Palestine, which included West Jerusalem. So for that reason, I don't actually recognize anymore the land that was designated under UN 181 was internationally legally agreed. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, if Israel wants its state, that should be it. Okay. That's the law. The international law is what we live. So, I'm sorry, but that's what I go along with.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Israel has abused and conquered land. I think that's obviously factual. But one.
Sorry, just say that. Just say that again, Chandler.
Okay, I think it's factual and reasonable to say that Israel has conquered land and somewhat abuse the situation that they've been put in. I don't think that's unreasonable to say whatsoever.
Yes, they have conquered land, and that is not legal.
Yeah, I agree. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, I might have kind of just missed a little bit what you said, but you said something like, it's the fact that Israel has conquered land, but I missed a little bit there. I didn't know if you were sort of condoning that or not. I'm not sure. So I apologize if I missed it slightly.
Yeah. No.
Okay. So are we agreed that the acquisition of this extra territory through military action is actually wrong? Are we agreed on?
Yeah. So I think it's wrong. I think what Israel did was wrong to wrongly take this land. I'm going to agree with you on that. I don't think. Well, once again, harboring back to the debate I had with Julian, I don't think it's wrong for the U.S. to recognize the capital, because whether or not they justly took the land, it's still the logical thing to recognize the capital of a group of people, whether or not it was justly taken or not. And especially coming to Donald Trump and the fault that's being placed on him, when it's the president's job and his obligation to the American people to enforce bills passed by his Congress that are overwhelmingly passed by his Congress, I may add, it comes a time where he has to move that embassy there. And that was the whole core of my debate with Julian, more than whether or not the Israeli people had, a right to Jerusalem as a city.
I get that. I do get that as a point, and I accept that it's that your point is more about a constitutional duty of the president of the United States. But even so, it's stupid. It's just the wrong thing to do. It is going to cause an awful lot of trouble. We pointed out. It's part of the bullying, I think. I'm actually really glad that Trump, because not because I agree with what he's doing. I like the fact that he's in power, because the world is actually finally seeing the true face of America, and people are kind of waking up and they're going, "Oh, what's this guy doing?" Oh, they're going out on the streets protesting, and they're standing next to people who've been protesting for years, and so the people who've been protesting for years are saying, "Well, where the fuck have you been?" Because Obama did all sorts of bloody shit, you know. So, excuse my
No,
French.
it's fine.
Racist thing to say, isn't it? Excuse my French, because, like, you know, it's not just French people who swear.
Yeah, but to get onto that, yeah, but yeah, I get what you're saying. But okay, well, to start, even though Trump's not perfect and he's his faults, I'm a big supporter. I think he's done an excellent job in his first year in office. And while I necessarily don't think, I think the core to this, because Donald Trump got a bunch of unnecessary and unwarranted criticism for moving the embassy to Jerusalem. If you want to criticize anybody, criticize the 1995 Congress that voted overwhelmingly to do this. Criticize the Senate in 2016 for renewing this. I don't think it's fair to fault Donald Trump for his constitutional obligation. That was the core of my debate with Julian, and that's the point I was trying to get to. But even what we talked about in the comment section in my other debate, and I kind of want to go to that, where we talk about the Palestinian leadership versus the Israeli leadership. If the Palestinian leadership, because I know refugees was a big point Julian talked about, if refugees and how refugees are handled is so important to the Palestinian leadership, then why are they so hesitant and unwilling, frankly, to come to the table and discuss refugees and discuss relations with the Prime Minister of Israel?
Well, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. You can't say the Palestinians negotiate. That's just nonsense. But it is quite clear, especially under Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership, that Israel's not interested. Don't forget, we've seen the clip where Netanyahu is in the home of settlers. This is going back quite a few years now. He's in the home of some, well, I won't call them settlers. What I'll call them is racial colonists, because that's what they are. They live in a racial colony in the Palestinian territories. And they sort of say, "Oh, Mr. Prime Minister, we're worried. What if this land becomes part of a state for Palestine?" And Netanyahu comes back to her and says, "The Oslo Accords say that there's a kind of a caveat in it that how did he put it? He said that." That we can only do this sort of as long as it doesn't affect security. And it excludes military zones. Well, and he says, as the whole of the West Bank is a military zone, and he's got no intention ever of giving up the West Bank. I mean, look what he said at the election recently. He said, come on. Vote, because the Arabs are coming out in droves to vote, so let's not get them in. This is the Israeli Arabs, and then he said, two-state solution, not on my watch. There's no way that a two-state solution is ever going to work. It's too late.
Okay.
So, sorry, I'm just trying to get the thread of what your original question was now.
So
the Palestinians, their heads on the wall. The offer that's on the table from the Palestinians, and also the rest of the world, apart from America and Micronesia, is a return to the 67 borders, which I think is actually quite generous, because don't forget the US one actually allocates a lot less land to Israel than that. So a return to the 67 borders, East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine, with a just solution for the refugee issue. Just to add to that as well, there is openings for deals regarding land swaps, but I hear this again and again. This idea of the Palestinians were offered 90%. Etc. And one, they refused it. That's actually nonsense. They've never been offered. It's are very misleading, because the 10% is actually very important. I think I put it in the comments section below yours and Julian's debate, but you were saying that the Palestinians were offered it, said no. I just want to make clear to the viewers what that deal was. And it was for most of the racial colonies to be kept, particularly the ones that, in fact, the ones that sat on the main water sources, which is extremely important. Okay. Also, Israel were would drive two huge highways right the way through the Palestinian territories, in effect breaking it up in three different sections. The entire Jordan Valley would be militarized with racial colonies down there as well, and they were only offered a tiny suburb of the refugee solution that was offered to them, which was ridiculous, was 5,000 refugees to be allowed back to their homes of which they've got at a rate of 1,000 per year. Now, I'm sorry, but that's a shit deal. You know, would you accept that seriously?
Well, the point I was making in my debate with Julian, I'm bringing up now, is not that the deal from the Israels and the Prime Minister was fair or even just or anything remotely like that. The point was, because I wouldn't accept it, I don't think they should have accepted it. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for them to try and have at these camps, like the Camp David in 2008, civil discussions and negotiate, because all the reports, including Bill Clinton in 2000. Is the one that reported it, said that the Palestinian leadership turned it down without suggesting a counteroffer. So,
yes, I know. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. You know, this is it all the way. It's, you know, the Western media always is on the side of Israel, so it's always the Palestinian fault. It's blame the victims, isn't it? Every time. I'm just sick of hearing all that.
I mean, I don't think it's all the Palestinians' fault, but I feel like at least, because I mean, there's no way, like, do you think the President of the United States could lie about there being, if they had like the Camp David, there was like a bunch of peace talk and the negotiations, and then to go to the public and say, yeah, the Palestinians didn't give an offer, and he could get away with lying about that? No, I mean, I'm sure somebody would.
Well, the president,
yes, the President of the United States.
The president lied.
And get away on a foreign level, on a worldwide, he would never get away with it. We would never get away with it.
You mean like, I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
But the there's a difference here. The difference is Bill Clinton still got a lot of opposition, and he just didn't happen to get convicted. He was still went through the impeachment process because of that. There was a lot of proof and opposition. If you were going to go out to the American people, or actually the people of the world at this point, and say this peace summit, one side didn't give any counteroffer and wasn't willing to negotiate, and to have no opposition, like, I mean, surely somebody, if it wasn't true whatsoever, would have said something and called him on that BS, right? Like they did when he said, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Somebody would call him on that. And so I don't think we can just regard it as nonsense, because there's no opposition to it whatsoever that's held in a factual basis. And he has some credibility, even though he's Bill Clinton, being the President of the United States at a foreign summit. But like I said in the comment of the other debate, I think it comes down to, as a leader, you have an obligation to your people to try to achieve what you're looking for, achieve these, like peace, for example, through negotiations the best way possible. I don't think it's just or right to the offer that Israel gave them, but I think it's equally absurd for you to decline it without trying to negotiate or have a counter offer, which is what has been reported on two different instances that I was able to find in 2000 and 2008.
Yeah, well, you know, all sorts of things are reported. That's not the actuality. That's not that. Dear me. Look at the situation. You know, we had the Oslo Accords in 1993. What's happened since then? We've had Netanyahu, who was in power shortly after that, who reneged on all sorts of things, who just obviously just went out to deceive everybody. Since then, we've had new settlement blocks, racial colonies built again, and, you know, expanded. The security wall going up on Palestinian territory. There's now, what is it? I think 650,000 illegal Jewish settlers in the West Bank. I mean, that's a move towards peace. I don't think so. Can you not see how it is that Israel does? They just do not intend to give that land up. It's so obvious. no matter what anybody says. Oh, what would you do? Like, oh God, you've got all these people here. We've got all these bloody great big racial colonies, these highways. What they're going to do is rip them all up. Nonsense. The two-state solution is dead. It's been dead for years. The only way forward, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, is a one state, just like your state, where you have one law for everybody, and nobody goes around asking, "Oh, are you Jewish? Are you Arab? Are you this?" Who gives a shit? I don't. You know, I live in a society. Got all sorts of people here. We have one law for everybody, just like you do. You know, the things that were done to the Native Americans in America was wholly unjust. You have progressed to a state now where you know people can live anywhere in the states. There is one law that applies to everybody. Look at Israel. I mean, come on, really?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think you bring up some good points, and I think that's fair. But you know, I don't think it's fair to completely pin all of the issues on Israel, because even if Israel and the Israeli leadership gives you an unfair deal, gives you a biased deal, it's still your obligation to attempt to negotiate to your people. You're not a good leader if you turn down if you are so concerned about like refugees, about land and water supply, it's your obligation to your people to try and negotiate for those things rather than just turning down the offer, right? I mean, we can agree on that. Like, that's your job when you're an elected official. You're supposed to go and try and negotiate on the behalf of your citizens.
Yes, and the offers that are being given to the Palestinians are couched in a way that makes them accept it. I mean, I laughed a little bit when Julian said to you something about if I offered you $1 to come and cut my lawn, would you call me back? Which I thought was a really good one. And there was something about, rocks at my windows and that sort of thing. I'll take it a step further. It's a little bit like if I came in and took your house, okay, and said to you, well, out of the goodness of my heart, I'm going to give you a little bit of land just bottom where you have your dog kennel. You can live in there. And then you say, well, no, I want my house back. Oh, well, you can't have your house back. So, and then you say, well, look, at least give me half my house back. No, look, you can have the dog kennel and you can have the... Hey, right, look, I've made you an offer and you're not going to... What, you're refusing it? Gosh. Well, I've been generous and you're the one that's turning it all down.
But
what's wrong?
But the difference here is if you're making the deal trying to get your house back, you have an obligation to your family that's sleeping outside in the chicken coop in the cold to try and negotiate to get your house back. You don't.
Yes,
no, you don't.
Exactly. And you'd be trying with me. You'd be coming to me saying, can I please have my... Well, I'll give you another 2 feet and I'll put a hose pipe down for you. How's that? Okay.
But that's not what's happening.
Look, we've negotiated and you've refused it again. Gosh, but it is what's happening, for goodness sake. Of course it is. You're not looking at the reality.
So from what's reported, that's the only thing we can go off of is what's reported. So when you have a U.S. president,
I don't. Yeah. I don't know where you're getting your information from, Chandler. Look, I studied this subject very deeply for years. Okay, and then. I mean, with respect, you come along and you things. I mean, I know I said that thing about Fox News. Okay, you might have got it from Fox News, but there's the sources that forget it. Look at the facts. Look at the papers that come out of the meetings.
So the president of the United States isn't a reliable source. A elected official that's the highest office and representative for our country, coming and reporting on a summit is probably the most credible source that we can use to equate what happened. Among the most.
Look, you're still harping on. Are you still harping on about the Bill Clinton thing at?
Because we're still talking about it. We're still discussing.
Yeah, the deal was crap. Okay, it doesn't matter whether the Palestinians walked away from it. It was a crap deal. Okay,
if you.
Offering anything else, there comes a point we have to call people.
But see,
stuff.
here's the problem here. Here's the problem here. Okay, let me. I'm going to use your analogy about the house. I come in, I take your house, I say you can go sleep in the yard, right? That's terrible. It's atrocious. But then you just sleep in the yard, and when you don't, I say, well, you know what? I'll give you back, the chicken coop, and you just turn it down. Don't even talk. You have an obligation to your family that's sleeping outside in the cold to try and negotiate to get your house back. But
Yes.
it's not happening. Is the problem?
Well, I'll tell you for why. No, I'll tell you why, Chandler. Okay, because I would be accepting that as a settlement, and it's not good enough. That's why. Come on, look. He's saying, look, we have got to, let's say we've got to sort out. Okay, we say, right, we are going to come to a settlement, and we are going to sign this off, and then we are going to stop arguing. We're going to get on with our lives. If you're saying, yes, just accept the chicken coop and expect me to sign that off as all done. No, I'm not going to do that. Who would in their mind do that? They are going to say, no, until I just solution that I seek, I am not going to sign your deal.
But it's not about negotiating. Or I'm sorry, well, it's not about accepting the offer or not about signing the piece of paper. It's about negotiating for the things that are important to you. It's very difficult for me to believe the Palestinian government is so caught up, because Julian brought this up several times about refugees and how refugees are treated, and yet they're not willing to negotiate
They
for a
haven't
deal.
got a government. They haven't got a government, Chandler. It's not a state.
I mean, you know what I mean, right?
By using the word government, the Palestinians have more power than they have. They haven't. And you're saying, like, negotiate with what can they actually say? Well, you can have this, and we can have, what have they got to negotiate with? They've got no weapons.
Peace. That's what the whole Camp David was about. That's what all this was about. It's about peace.
But the Palestinian Authority is committed to a peaceful solution. What are you talking about? Peace. They're not the ones going round with bloody M16s in the occupied territories. That's the Israelis. Have you not noticed?
Yeah, both sides are incredibly guilty. But I'm saying it.
No, they're not. Excuse me. No, they are not. Excuse me. The Palestinian people are an occupied, unarmed people. You cannot say they are equally guilty. For goodness sake, look at the situation. You've got what is funny, is it really? Well, you've got the IDF, okay, the Israeli Defense Force that started out as a bunch of terrorists, started out as the I can't remember now. Was it the Stern Gang or the other one? But anyway, started out as terrorists, are occupying the West Bank just the same way that the Nazis occupied the Low Countries in France. Say that the Palestinians should advocate peace or should make peace. What do you mean should make peace? They're not at war with them. They're not armed, for goodness sake. What are you talking
so you
about?
Think there's been no acts of violence or aggression from the Palestinians against the people of Israel?
I didn't say there's no acts of violence. None at all. A lot of them are actually perfectly legal, because East Jerusalem, for instance, is an unrecognized annexation, okay? Under international law, that is occupied territory. The civilian in those areas attacks a soldier in East Jerusalem. That is actually legal. It's legal in exactly the same way French resistance attacked not Nazi German soldiers in World War II.
Okay, but I mean,
do you disagree with that?
You're breaking up a bit. I'm having difficulty hearing you.
The same in Area C. Area C. I don't know if you know how the West Bank is divided up. You've got areas A, B, and C. Area C, which is by far the biggest area, is completely controlled militarily and administratively by the Israelis. Again, it's occupied territory.
So, but
of course, acts of violence. A lot more acts of violence are meted out on the Palestinian people. Absolutely, tons more.
The only thing I said were both parties were guilty. I didn't say that the Palestinians were terrorizing the Jewish people.
You said equally no. You said equally guilty. I think, and that's why
my exact words were both parties were incredibly guilty. I never said equally. They both are guilty of violence.
Well, I think that amounts to pretty much the same thing, and I'm sorry,
okay.
I disagree. And I think if you look at the statistics and the facts, you'll see the reality. You know, you look at the ancient olive groves that are being uprooted and burnt down by the settlers, by the racial colonists in those territories. I don't think you're looking at the actuality of what's actually happening. I know people who go there and come back who tell me. I had a chap called Iyad Burnat who came here to my bookshop a few months ago. He's the leader of the non-violent resistance, which is right on where the wall is. While he was here, one of his sons was shot in the middle of the night. Fortunately, not killed, but he's got 4 sons, and 3 of them, the oldest one, 3 of them have already been shot. One of them has received life-changing injuries as a result of that. Absolutely shameful what goes on. His eldest son now has been arrested by the IDF and put on administrative detention without being charged. People have got to open their eyes to what's really going on. There's something like I'll have to look the figures up, but it's something like 350 children in Israel, in Israeli jails, under administrative detention. That's against the Geneva Convention, because they are tried in military courts. They are moved out of their home villages into Israel proper. That's illegal.
I agree there's problems here, but I actually have some numbers up right now that actually, to quote that, they're from the Washington Post, and I mean they report that there's this was in 2016, late 2016, that Palestinians' attacks on Israeli citizens were happening daily. They have specific incident reports of the individual types of attacks. So I don't think it's fair to say that the entire violence is only one-sided to Israel, because even if you look historically. Back in the 1964 and in the 60s before 1967, even when it was still Palestinian controlled, there were still acts of violence. In 1929, when Israel was still occupied by the British, there were still acts of violence. I know.
Yes. You said all this. Oh no, you said all this with Julian. Now, I'm sorry, but 2 things. First of all, please don't quote the Washington Post, because that's not a legitimate source of information, I'm afraid. I don't care. I don't disagree. In 2016, there was violence. There was, absolutely. I didn't say that it didn't happen. It happens it happens when, one of the reasons the violence happened at that time is because Netanyahu had said, when he was up for election, he said, there is not going to be a Palestinian state on my watch. What the hell are these people supposed to do? Got these young people who've got no inner life outside of being militarily occupied, going through checkpoints all the time. It's crazy. Look at it properly. Look at the violence that happens. Look at the peaceful protests that get tear gassed, that get beaten up. The guy, Iyad Burnat, who I was telling you about, they pepper sprayed him in the eyes, and then they put a bandage around his eyes to keep all the pepper spray in, so he couldn't get it cleaned out. This guy came and saw me and told, he came and spoke to us and told us about these things. It's bloody criminal what's going on. Anyway, I could give you all sorts of examples of the sort of violence that's meted out against Palestinian people. Every single day they live this. But we've only got 1 minute and 11 left. So I think we should just sum up now if you want to.
Yeah, so I'll go for about 30 seconds. So the core of this debate and kind of what it was with Julian is, once again, I'll recite that the president has the obligation to the people to pass laws put forward by Congress. Israel has historic ties to Jerusalem. We talked about that a bit, and that the U.S. whether or not
no, it has to. No, it hasn't got historic ties because you're citing the frigging Bible again.
What do you?
It's not history. I don't buy that.
We'll have I'll schedule another debate about a discussion about the Bible's role in history.
And most sensible people don't buy that. Most educated people do not buy that shit.
All right, it's been a pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you too. It's been good. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have a nice night.
Okay, mate. See you again.